Well, welcome to our last class. Would love to have been able to do this one face to face, but I think this will work just as well. What I want to do is give you guys a little demonstration of a couple third-party products that I use that really improve the look of an image. I'm not a huge fan of plugins. Um, I think a lot of times they're just sort of the lazy man's way of doing things that you can do just as easily in Photoshop. But every once in a while, I'll find a couple that really do either do a great job in ways that are impossible to duplicate, or they just make the process so much simpler that it doesn't make sense to do it any other way. So I'm going to show you a couple of files. These were done. I think you may have. I think I've used this one before. This is a stitched panorama that was done near Vegas last year. And it looks okay once it's all done, but it lacks a little bit of punch. It needs a little bit of extra oomph, in my opinion, to make this really sing. And so that's where these plugins come in. Once they're installed, you'll find them under the filter menu. And the first one I'm going to show you is Nik Color Efex Pro 4. And let's get this window open and let's get some real estate here. So the lower right shows you sort of a zoomed in version. Wherever you click in the image, uh, or move your cursor in the image, it's going to show you a little preview in the bottom. Now I already have a filter preloaded here, and it's the one that I use most often. It's called Nik Tonal Contrast. And I'll click the compare button and show you the before and after. And this is fairly low level, like we're not really going too far over the top here. Of course, we have lots of adjustments. We can play with the midtones, shadows, and highlights separately, just to give you an idea. So I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a middle of the road. You can also protect the shadows and protect the highlights from the original image. There's a number of different contrast types. As you go over these, it'll give you a little preview. I use the standard one more often than not. But there's a lot of variation within the sliders here on the right-hand side. It also allows you to do control points, which mean you can do local adjustments rather than global, and radiate out from an area where the effect will take place or where it won't. But I find that it's way more convenient, way more efficient to do this on a layer mask once it's back in Photoshop. So in other words, I'll apply the effect to the entire image, and then mask it out back in Photoshop. In fact, I have an action for this that does all of that. It does all the setup for me. In other words, it'll apply the filter. Once back in Photoshop, it adds the layer mask. Actually, I think Color Efex Pro will add its own layer mask on a separate layer, and selects a brush for me that allows me to mask out certain areas. It's just a little more convenient doing it that way. So I don't use the control points in here. Once you adjust these and you find that you're using certain settings a lot, you can click the save button and then you're saved under recipes on the left. It will show up here, so you can easily call back certain settings that you've used in the past. There are a lot of filters in here. As you see, I'll scroll down. I'll show you a couple of them, but primarily this is the one that I'm using for landscape work. I'm also using it for real estate, architecture, anything that just needs a little extra. But let's look at some of the other ones. So we do have a black and white conversion. I like the fact that you can set a color filter, which is going to adjust the colors based on what's in the image. Not as full featured as doing the black and white conversion in Photoshop, but it's pretty good. And again, a number of sliders that you can play with. There's a bicolor filters, and as you scroll down the list, the preview updates and the thumbnail shows you basically what you're getting there. So Again, there's a lot of reasons for using these. There's a bleach bypass, which is a real cool um, desaturated, grungy look. Not so much for this type of an image, but I'll actually use this on portrait images if I'm trying to give it a grungy look and feel. The brilliance and warmth we'll come back to in a second. Soft focus is something I would use on people. Um, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but we'll just kind of show you. Color contrast range is pretty cool because it does change the contrast based on, again, you see the color changing here. So I usually seem to find myself just a little left of center here, and you can see that it adds quite a bit of punch and color. So that's a pretty good choice for something like this as well. Cross processing, detail extractor is another really good one. Again, if you look at the before and after, let's try to zoom in on a rock or something here. Yeah, you can see that again. Maybe not the best image for that, but it is one that I use quite a bit. We have different film effects. Just kind of go through these really quickly. There's a fog filter in here. Um, Different variations of fog, different intensities, and so forth. There's a graduated fog, which you can have be more or less part of an image. Left, right, bottom. There's just a lot of different options here. There's a high key, there's an Indian summer. The infrared is kind of cool for something like this because there's a lot of presets in here. This almost looks alien, almost like something on the moon. And then there's some color versions as well, which are kind of interesting. I'll play with that every once in a while. Whole bunch of others in here, but we're not going to get into too many of them right now. Solarization is kind of interesting. So tonal contrast, we'll go back to that. And again, there's the before and after. But I also want to pump the color up a little bit. So one of the things that Color Effects allows you to do is to stack filters. So I can click the Add filter. I've still got the tonal contrast there. And I'm going to go up to Brilliance and Warmth and add that. And all I do is pull the saturation up a little bit and the warmth a little bit. Of course, we can go to the cool side. We can go way to the warm side. But again, I find that just about, between 10 and 15% gives me about all I need on that. So there's the tonal contrast, there's the brilliance and warmth, and there's before and after on both of them. So I'm going to cancel that so it doesn't have to go through the process because I do have the before and after here. So that's before processing and oops, go up, and that's after. So you can see there's quite a bit of difference. We haven't made it really look unnatural, but it's definitely way more saturated and way more punchy overall. So I'll just show you some before and after examples of using those two filters put together. These were shot for a real estate job, interiors and exteriors of this house. This is straight out of camera. And in addition to the color and the contrast, you'll notice that some of the perspectives have been changed and fixed. Notice that, there's some converging lines. The verticals aren't quite straight because of the extreme wide angle. So that's been corrected as well. But that's before and after. Quite a bit more detail, especially in that ceiling area. Just adds a lot more punch to it. So again, this is out of camera. Notice the window up at the top of the steps with the horse, how very little detail there is there. Part of that is done in the raw file processor and part of it is done in the filter. But it just adds a whole other level of warmth to this image. Here's one of the exteriors of that building. This is out of the camera. Whoops. And that is with the processing. So you can see what a valuable tool this is as far as making images like this just really sing and pop. We'll just show you a few more examples. This is inside the Hampton Inn on National Road, and then it's a very colorful area, but Digital cameras, just for the most part, they need some help. They tend to record things a little bit softer, particularly in RAW files. And so, the raw file converters can clean that up quite a bit, but then the filter adds just another level of, we're going to come back to that, interest. So this is another one shot in the Valley of Fire. This is straight out of camera, and then that's with the effect added. So, and of course we've put a border around it as well, but everything about this just makes this image sing a whole lot better. So I've got 3 of these. This is right out of the camera. And then this is just with the raw file processor. In other words, just going into Camera Raw and making some adjustments. We went from here to here. Especially notice the background area, the hills and the sky, how much detail has been brought out. But it still wasn't quite enough. So Nik Color Effects came to the rescue and added a little more color, a little more pop. So that's with the Camera Raw adjustments, and that's with Nik. Same general location. This color is all there. It's just that the camera isn't, quite capable of pulling it all in, and you need something to give it a little boost, and so that's Color Effects. This is in Nelson, Nevada. I love using these, especially the tonal contrast filter on old wood and buildings and things like that. It just adds a whole other, like I said, a whole other dimension. Brings back some detail even in some areas that were a little lacking in it. And sometimes we'll go a little bit over the top. This is a shot from Bart Camp a couple of years ago. That's the original shot, and then that's with mostly Color Effects. There may have been another filter other than tonal contrast. I'm not sure. But that's our original, and that's with the filter added. So that's a little more over the top. So that's Nik Color Effects, and I'll show you in a few minutes. I'll give you the information on where to find these filters and so forth. There's another one that I use occasionally called Topaz Adjust. So let's open an image like this. This is from the Overlooks fireworks from last year. And we'll go under Topaz Labs, and you can see they've got a whole bunch of filters. Noise reduction, sharpening, masking, just all sorts of things. Topaz Adjust is pretty much the one that I use exclusively. I don't mess too much with the other ones unless I have a specific need. But this filter goes a little bit beyond. You have to have the right kind of image for it. And the nice thing about it is that as you roll your cursor over these, it gives you a pretty good preview of what they're going to look like. So if you apply one, then you can see the before and after. Now again, you don't have to be satisfied with the let's go to boost. You don't have to be satisfied with what it gives you, because you've got all these sliders over here that you can adjust to completely change this in whatever way you find appropriate. And so this is just in the exposure area. Then we also have the details area. Increase or decrease the amount of detail. I mean, I'm making some pretty radical changes here. There's a color area, a curve tool, which is going to change the overall density. So you can see that there's kind of a lot of different stuff here. Let's kind of go down and look at a few of these. The gritty one's kind of interesting. It's very similar to the bleach bypass in Nik. So these are ones that I would use for a little bit of a different type of an image. And again, over here we have a whole bunch of different collections. The stylized ones are even more over the top. You get this blueprint, you get a kind of a comic book. Then you go into this ghostly Dark Knight. I really like that one. I think that one's kind of cool. And again, you can come in and play with exactly what you do with that one. Day glow. We'll just look at some of the thumbnails here. Glow in the dark is kind of interesting for an image like that. Psychedelic is always kind of fun. There's a sketch. Whoops. That's not the one I was looking at. There we go. A charcoal sketch. There are some solarized images. I actually have another image that would look better for this. So let's go into that. I think this might be a little more interesting for that. Takes a second for this plugin to activate. All right, so yeah, again, blueprint, just going down the list of these. There are literally hundreds of these things. And there are collections, and then again, each collection, each filter in each collection, sometimes we're just toning them a little bit, but each one has an ultimate, or an unlimited rather, um, number of adjustments that you can make on the right hand side. So those two plugins are ones that I use for enhancement a lot, and we'll go look at them on the website. So this is Nik Color Effects Pro's website. They do have free trials. You can download the fully functional version of this and play with it. The Color Effects Pro says includes all the 7 plugins and Photolab 2 for $99. That's a pretty good price. Go down through the list. It just shows you some examples. Shows you how the interface works. A couple of selling points, and then these are the programs that it actually has. Silver Effects Pro is an interesting one. It does all sorts of conversions to black and white. It's the most fully featured black and white conversion program I've seen. It can actually emulate just about any film that was ever done. You can do HDR as well. There's actually 2 websites for this. I'm not sure quite why, but this will show you a few more. Yeah, so an upgrade is $59, the full thing is $99, and then there is a free trial. So color effects, this is silver effects that I was telling you, the black and white. Viveza. Analog effects is sort of an old film look. HDR. Sharpener. Noise reduction, and then again the where you can buy all of that. So Topaz also has free trials. If you go to download, there's a free trials version, or a free trials link right here, and it'll show you a little bit about some of what it does with the interface, what each program does. So this is interesting. It's kind of an interactive little thing. So this is basically to Mask Pro is to mask out, in this case, the background and change the sky. Topaz Adjust is what I was using a minute ago. Removing noise. Boy, look at the noise on the left hand side, and then with the filter added. Sharpening. Gigapixel is pretty interesting. It increases the resolution of an image if you need to do that. And there's one that actually removes a lot of JPEG artifacting. So it's got all of this. Again, this is the gigapixel. So there's your original, and that's after processing with that filter. And we'll get to the pricing here in a minute. Here's some examples of images that people have done with them. And they have two bundles basically. So sharpening, noise reduction, JPEG artifacts, and gigapixel. These are actually the commercial. They're actually, I think these are less expensive. There must be another website that I have missed. Because I think these prices are actually lower. I believe that this one goes for 149 and I believe this one goes for 99. So this is the one that I would be using, Topaz Adjust. But it also has a couple of other ones popped in there as well. So anyway, those are a couple of plugins you might consider looking at because they really, really do improve the look of an image. Like I said, if you take an image like that and just see what you can do with it. So the last thing I want to show you here is a little effect, something, this is unrelated, but it's something you can do right in Camera Raw. You can also do this in Lightroom. You can do this in pretty much any raw file processor. And so a lot of times I'll shoot images intending to do this technique, which is a high contrast black and white. And if you look closely, you can see the highlights. So I've got a beauty dish directly overhead, and then I've got a reflector, a curved reflector underneath. And what it does is it kind of creates on its own almost a shadowless lighting because the light that's coming down hits that reflector and is bounced back up. But it does need a little bit of help. And this technique will really make an interesting image. So the first thing I do is just pull the saturation all the way down. Take it to black and white. Then I'm going to start playing with the highlights, the whites, and then the blacks I'm going to pull almost all the way down, maybe even all the way down, and then take the exposure up. And you can see what happens here. So you can play a little more with the highlights and the whites until you get exactly the mix that you're looking for. But what it does, I try not to go far enough to, like, you can see this little contour on her shadow, or on her cheek. I don't want to lose that, but I want to get rid of as many other things that I would normally have to retouch as possible. So the blacks are all the way to the bottom. Let's add a little bit of clarity. Yeah, definitely add a little bit. And there's our before and after. So without doing any retouching whatsoever, it's made that a pretty fashion type of an image. So cancel out of that. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a heads up. It's impossible in the class. I could have brought my laptop to display these, but I can't do it on the computer in the lab because we can't load software. So maybe this method works a little bit better for for these techniques. So anyway, if you're interested, check those things out. In this video, I will, if I can remember to do this, I'll post a link to those websites in the comments below the video, so you can go right to the websites and check them out. All right, so we will see you one more time before, or you'll hear from me one more time before the review next week, and that will be the critique. Actually, there's an image, Paul. I want to pull your image up here. Let's just take a look at this because this is the type of an image that I would use this Topaz Adjust on. There are a couple of filters in here that would really, because with a and I'm not going to talk about the image yet. We'll save that for the critique. But when I'm shooting somebody like this, I typically want the lines and the age to really show here. So that's before, that's after. Let's look at, there's a couple others, the detail ones, something like that. I mean, that, wow, it might be a little, if it's too strong, you can do the main one. But I think that a lot of these maybe is a little too much contrast. I really think I like that one. But anyway, you can see the before and after. Might be something for images like that to consider, bringing out just a little more detail, actually a lot more detail. Anyway, so we'll do the critique here shortly, and then I will be sending you an email link for the Zoom review that we're going to do next Thursday at 3:30. All right, guys, have a great weekend.